Recording now. Perfect. So this week we've been hosting sessions from organisations who took part in the Catalyst Sector Challenge programme, which was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. And these projects were a collaborative effort from organisations working in the mental health and the sexual abuse and domestic violence sectors to solve some of the challenges that had emerged from COVID. And today we'll be hearing from some fantastic speakers about their project that was looking at online counselling. So I'd like to introduce Harry and Hannah from Neontribe, who are going to talk to you about their project, how they approached it, some of the things that they learned, and some of the tools that they produced. So I would love to hand it over to them now.
Hi, thank you, Helen. Fantastic speakers. Oh, you build us up. So we, myself and Hannah, work for Neontribe. We are one of the digital agencies who were involved in this sector challenge. We were joined by an organisation called Deepr and another organisation called Promo Cymru. We are, all of us, digital agencies who specialise in tech for good work. So we are agencies who hope to help the third sector understand what digital is, become more digital in their thinking where appropriate, and help folk make the best impact they can on the outcomes they're looking for. We were joined in this sector challenge by a number of charities. They helped us tremendously. They were our bank of knowledge. We, of course, are digital agencies. We work in tech for good, but it was the knowledge provided by the people at Brown CIC, Circles, Imara, Nottinghamshire Women's Aid and SAFE, which really helped us come to the conclusions we came to and build the products that we did. So what I'm hoping to do is talk for half an hour. I'm so sorry. Thank you for giving up your lunchtime to listen to me talking for half an hour. And then Hannah will do a demonstration of the product that we produced. And if we have time, we will then take to a peer network called Slack, which many of you may have heard of. And there we will show a technique we used during the project, and we will ask some questions. If you have any questions during the call, please drop them in the chat, and I will endeavour to either answer them as I go along or take time at the end to answer them. Thank you very much for doing so. We'd love it if people did ask questions. So I've got half an hour, and I haven't got a timer in front of me, which was careless of me. I'll get a timer. It's okay. I can see a clock. All will be well. Thank you for your time. So what we did was we spoke to the charities we were talking about with the ambition of coming together as a sector and helping people deliver more effective counselling. Over the next half an hour, I hope to present how we use design thinking methods to develop and test our approach, how we used a low-code approach to develop a resource sharing bank, and how we used a peer network to test our concepts and ideas. That first bullet is me for the next half an hour, and the next two bullets are the last few minutes when Hannah will join in. What was this challenge? The challenge was to work together as a sector to tackle the challenges of providing online counselling in a time of COVID and to improve the quality of support available to service users. So, whereas before COVID, counselling was often provided face-to-face, after COVID, during COVID, increasingly service providing organisations are delivering counselling face-to-face. That brings with it a series of challenges, the challenges of safety, the challenges of identity, and a number of other challenges that organisations have struggled with and in many cases triumphantly overcome. So our
Oh, Harry, you've gone on mute.
Good.
Yeah.
That's better. So our approach to dealing with this problem was to use design thinking. This process is how the Design Council believes that design should be undertaken. The notion is that you start by a discovery process to find out what the problems are, what the boundaries of your design solution might be, and then you define a specific strategy, a particular problem to look at, and that's that first diamond shape. The second diamond is when you go wide again. You explore the methods by which you might design a solution to the problem, and then at the back end of that second diamond, you deliver. What I would really like you to go away with today, to leave this session with, is a notion of how this process feels. So, discovery, you go wide. Definition, you come back in again, you narrow down. Develop, you go broad again to think of ideas and solutions. Delivery, you come back narrow again. This slide was our anchor throughout the process. This double diamond is how we kept ourselves on track, how we kept ourselves working in the right direction, and how we, as a group of digital partners, worked with the charities who were involved in the project. So in the discovery phase, Promo Cymru were in the lead. In the definition phase, it was Deepr who was in the lead. And then we came together in that develop phase, Deepr is Neontribe. And then in that definition phase, all three of the digital agencies were very much involved. This slide is a little bit scary, I'm afraid. There's too many words on it. I should have narrowed it down. I should have perhaps taken some of these words off. So to distill it down to the essence, we have this: discover, define, develop, deliver. That process keeps us on track. So in discovery, we spoke to people. Deepr held some in-depth semi-structured interviews. They ran group sessions, and we took data and research from our charity partners to enable us to understand the problems around delivering online counselling, the challenges people had found. At this time of the project, all is well. You are at the initial stage of the project. You are going broad. You are finding stuff out. You are excited by the possibilities. This brings us on to the second stage of the double diamond, that definition process. Please don't try and read all these post-it notes. What happens during definition is you take all of the information, the facts, and the notes you've made during definition, and you start to define a particular problem and some solutions to it. So on that left-hand note, you can see how we were working using a piece of software which was a bit like post-it notes on a wall, which was the technique we would have used back in the day. We were synthesizing our findings into an understanding of a particular problem. And then on that right-hand side, you could just about see the words, how might we, at the top there. That was the process whereby we took the issues that we'd identified and we, distilled them out into some problems that we felt we could help with, some actions we felt we could take, which would help the charities and counsellors all throughout the sector perform their work better online. You will have access to these slides afterwards. So these are the 8 how might we's that we came up with. Of course, 8 is quite a large number of issues that we could examine. It's quite a large number of actions we could take. It's quite a large number of possibilities. What happens during this definition phase is that you are starting to feel a little uncomfortable about the project. And this is true throughout all of my experience of running design projects. In discovery, you were going broad. Everything was fine. During definition, you are coming back in again. You are therefore discarding some possibilities, and that can feel quite uncomfortable. What we did was we honed in on a couple of particular issues. It's number 7. How might we help people find resources and advice they might use in our work? And how might we help counsellors find out what had worked in their sector? Because one of the marvelous things we found in our first discovery phase is that folk in this sector don't seem to share as a sector. Every organisation had a stock of resources and a stock of wisdom, but there didn't seem to be a place where the sector came together. This is what we honed in on. This was the issue that we thought we could help with in a way which would be most useful. What we found was the problems that we had identified in delivering counselling online were many and manifold, but they had all been overcome by counsellors and by the organisations they operate. So if we could help the sector with a way of sharing that wisdom, then we felt we would make a real difference. And that was our definition process. So this is the problem statement that we honed in on. As a counsellor post-COVID, I need new skills, resources and confidence so that survivors can benefit from safe and engaging online counselling. But beyond my immediate organisation and colleagues, I have little access to this support. This is where we came to at the end of our definition phase. At this point, we were, and this is a metaphor which a chap called Matt, who works for Deepr, came up with, we were in the reeds. It was difficult to see that what the solution might be. And we struggled for a little while talking to the charities involved and the counsellors, how could we move forward? So what we did was we came up with a strategy. We felt that if we could experiment with a peer community and a resource bank, we could give people a place to talk about the issues they come across and a place to store resources that would enable them to have something to talk about, to have something to share. The reason we have a resource sharing platform and a resource bank is that we knew that in a fixed term project, we weren't going to be able to do all of the features that the best resource sharing platform ever, the best place to share resources, could possibly include. What we could do was develop a simpler resource bank. And that's what we did. We used some design thinking about the resource sharing platform to inform the development of a resource bank, and we tested these concepts using our peer community. So the strategy was to develop to use a peer community as a place for us to work together and as a place perhaps for long-term engagement activities, to develop a resource bank where we could store the resources we discovered and produced, which could live beyond the project, and to use this prototype resource sharing platform to consider what a future development project might look like, and to help us make the resource bank as good as it possibly could be. This led us to our development. We would develop a peer community. Back in the day, we would have built one as developers from scratch. Nowadays, of course, we don't need to do that. We used a place called Slack, which you may be familiar with, and we use Slack as a place to work and a place to discuss concepts. We will, I think, demonstrate Slack later. We tested that concept as a side effect of our way of working, really. So we tested the fact that people would share in a peer community. We were delighted by the feedback we got from the charities involved, which said that they really valued working with people within the sector. We did some consequence scanning of what might happen in a peer community. So what would be the consequences? And you can read those in the slides later. There are pros and cons to establishing an online peer community. People were very keen that the safeguarding issues should be taken extremely seriously. And so we did some work on governance to enable us to think that through. Our second output was the prototype resource sharing platform I mentioned earlier. So we started by doing some very simple wireframe designs of a prototype resource sharing platform. And we tested those designs with actual individuals, real counsellors who really work in this environment. And we iterated that prototype resource sharing platform, made it look more complete in terms of its design. And we got as far as this, a fairly finished, polished design artifact. This was really useful, partly because we could dream of an imagined future where a project might have the budget to develop such a place, but also because it enabled us to improve the resource bank we actually developed, which was our third output. We iterated this resource bank a lot. So we started off by gathering resources, by talking to the charities about good things they have seen, about the problems they had with online counselling, and about useful resources which had enabled them to overcome those problems. And we list them in a very simple Google spreadsheet. I mean, it's great, and it didn't take very long, but it isn't particularly helpful or particularly usable. So we iterated that resource bank after testing, and we started working on a platform called Notion, where you can build your own website, essentially. It's a nice structured platform. This goes back to a couple of things. Firstly, that low code approach I mentioned earlier. Back in the day, we would have developed this online resource bank, and it would have taken us quite a while. Nowadays, platforms and digital spaces exist where we can very quickly rustle up websites, deliver website functionality. And we did that using Notion. We tested it and we found some disadvantages, so we iterated again. We iterated twice, in fact. And eventually we used a platform called Coda. The advantage of these low-code approaches is you can make rapid progress towards something which is usable, very useful indeed. So we can actually deliver an online counselling resource bank. We had some really positive feedback to our testing. I've got a stack of quotations from people who were helping us by testing the usability of these resource banks. This is one of my favorites. No point in everyone doing the same work over and over again. What we found was in every organization, there were folk who would spend time finding good resources. They would spend time considering which resource was going to be useful in a particular situation. And everyone was duplicating this work. Now, if you can imagine how long people might take and how many people might be involved in this duplicated activity, you can see that there will be a real benefit to the sector in having a resource bank, in having somewhere central. Instead of having to go here, there, and everywhere. You can see I love this one so much, I wrote it down in block capitals. This was a counsellor who was just frustrated that they spent so much time searching Google for useful resources, and who felt that there was a user need to sort of spend less time. I really like the concept. I think it will be really helpful in the long run. These are all really useful usability testing comments. At this point, we are closing in. So we've done the first half of that second diamond. We have gone broad in our development. We are now closing in on what we will actually deliver and what will be most useful. We produced some other outputs during this process as we move forward to delivery. I talked about the governance principles. That was work led by SAFE, one of our charities. They're really useful, I think, and I recommend them to your attention. Like I say, we will share these slides and you'll be able to click on these links. We produced a glossary of terms. This was Hannah's work. We found that both ourselves as digital people and also the charities that we were working with had domain language, had terms we understood that the other side, that's a terrible way of putting it, words that we understood that our collaborators did not. We produced a glossary of terms so we could speak the same language, we could understand. The structured Slack technique will come across later. And then these original resources, which are on the resource bank. And when you see and find that, you'll be able to see them. So there was a large amount of work got done. And this was our delivery phase where we are narrowing down on what we will actually deliver. I have a slide here called Run Demo. Hannah.
And that is my cue. Thank you, Harry.
It is. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share mine. Yeah, have you got that? Cool. Okay. So this is the online counselling resource bank. what we did was we took all the findings and the research from the resource sharing platform and used that to kind of inform the way that we designed this one. Obviously, because Coda is like a low code, no code option, it doesn't have all of the features and it couldn't do all of the things that we wanted it to do, like it could do on the resource sharing platform. There are actually payment models that make some of the features more possible, and I can kind of tell you about them as we come to them. So currently you're looking at the homepage. At the top is kind of a graphic banner that kind of tells you more about the purpose of the site and what it does. Underneath this is the categories. Inside each of these categories, you can find more resources that are relevant to them. In the resource sharing platform, you might have seen that there was like a search bar there. That is what we found that users really wanted, but unfortunately we couldn't implement it in this version. And then after this, we've kind of got descriptions about what it's for, which is sharing the resources between counsellors and therapists. We also have a link to the Slack channel that Harry mentioned earlier. And then next we have like all the resources from like when they've most recently been uploaded. So at the top here, you can see that we do have some filter options. So a search bar that you can look for information that you want, and also a filter that does it by age. So children, adults, and teenagers. These features are part of the Coda paid plan. So if you were on the free plan, you wouldn't be able to use this. As you can see, there are now like some resources that we made for this thing. So you can see at the top, there is like a nice image for it. And then we have the organization name and then some information about it below. It works. So when you click on go to a resource, it takes you to an external link and you can read it there. You also have the option to open it up. And sometimes like people can put in more information and descriptions about it. I don't know if you can see here as well, there's like a little thumbs up symbol. There is also the option to upvote and downvote and react to it. This is part of the Coda paid features as well. And from our testing, we found that people really like to know who could do it. And you can actually see the people that have upvoted it if you installed that feature. So yeah, that keeps going down. And then right at the top, we have some more tabs. We have About, which tells you a little bit more about the background and the purpose of the project, and also kind of links to the charity and digital partners that worked on this project. Next, we have the add a resource bit. This is where people who come to it and want to share their resources, they can fill out a form in here by putting in all the information that you saw on the cards and extra stuff. And then when you submit that, it goes to a separate portal that a moderator can then look over and check on it. It is in this little section here. So currently you can kind of see this, like any visitor can view this section. But if you had one of the paid plans, you can actually hide this from view so that only the moderator can see that. And this kind of works basically as like a spreadsheet where you can see all of the information that the person who submitted it put up. If you click into it as well, you can edit that. You can like choose to delete the submission, and then you can choose to verify the resource if you think it is good. So when you verify the resource, it affects the way that you see the resource. So currently, if you don't verify it, the resource will come right at the bottom of it, so people will be less likely to see it. There is the option, sorry, to actually completely remove it from view, but to do that, you can't have these features because Coda isn't completely perfect, unfortunately. But yeah, and then we have the last one, which is our Slack community, which Harry mentioned before. It's kind of a place where people can find out more about the community, what it's about, how you can join, and also what the guidelines are for moderation and stuff. Yeah, and I think that is the whole online counselling resource bank. Don't think I've missed anything.
Nah, you're great. Thank you. So that's what the project produced. May I share my screen, please, Hannah?
Oh, yeah. Took me a minute. There.
Lovely. So that's the output of the project, is that resource bank of online counselling resources, and that was us. So for the duration of the project, we ran a Slack channel where people could discuss the issues that they'd come across during COVID, trying to run counselling using digital channels rather than face to face. We developed a resource bank because what we found was, and this is perhaps unsurprising in retrospect, all those barriers had been overcome. It wasn't the case that a digital project could come in, wave a magic wand, and make everything better. The fact was that counsellors and organisations who work with counsellors had overcome all the problems. What the issue is that we found was that those solutions were not effectively shared, hence our strategy. So at the end of the project, we come up with some next steps. And this is very much in tune with what I was talking about earlier about the double diamond and how you feel. You might remember I said at the beginning, everything is discovery. You are finding out new things all the time. You are very excited. You move on to definition, where you are starting to bring things in to form a particular strategy. And at that point, you are discarding some of the possibilities, and that can feel uncomfortable. Then you move into development, where again, you are going broad. You are excited by all the things you could possibly do and how you could overcome the different methods you could use to overcome the problem that you have identified, that you've honed in on. And that, again, is a very positive phase of the project. Then you move on to delivery, where, again, you are narrowing down the possibilities. You are discarding features which you don't have time or capability or budget to implement. And that, again, is an uncomfortable part of the project. And if there was one thing I would like you to leave here with, one piece of learning, as well as the concrete outputs that you will see when you visit the resource bank yourself, the piece of learning is that digital projects are at times uncomfortable, and they are uncomfortable when you are moving to define a specific problem and when you are reaching the end and you are narrowing down on what you are actually going to deliver. And at those points, we talked about, or rather Matt suggested the analogy of being in the reeds. I think that's a really useful analogy. The idea that digital projects might all be plain sailing is a piece of digital hubris, which we as a digital sector should steer way clear of. And I'm not sure we're always terribly good at that. So as a sector, as a representative of a sector, I'd like to recognise that digital projects are occasionally bumpy. These are our next steps after this project. Beautifully, one of the testers used these specific form of words. Can we keep it? About the resource bank. We were really gratified that the idea of a place where useful resources were stored so that they could be shared without having to just trek through the outer reaches of Google. We were really pleased with that. Our next steps, the resource sharing platform has pretty much done its job now. Unless a funder decides to pony up for the development of that, that's probably not going to work anymore, but it has done its job. It's enabled us to concentrate on really useful features in the resource bank, which actually exists. And our next step is to find a future home for the resource bank and find a future home for the peer community. We are digital agencies. We are tech for good people. What we would love to be able to do is to inspire the sector that these two things are so useful that the sector as a whole should be interested in taking these things forward. I've got some questions next. We're looking for a long-term home for the peer community in the resource bank. We would like to invest further in their development. As Hannah suggested, there are some features we'd like to add to the resource bank which require a paid-for platform. But you know, the resource bank as it exists with the features that it has is free in perpetuity, unless Coda change their business model. But they're unlikely to do that. So we have this free resource bank, which is developed, contains some resources. Some we found as part of the project, some we developed as part of the project. We would love to see that last longer. I'm now going to do something which I think is going to work. I said that we shouldn't have digital hubris. Well, let's see if this works. There is a peer network called Slack. Oops. On this peer network, we developed a structured way of using Slack. I'm not sure if you've used Slack before, but I am about to drop into the chat of this Zoom call a URL. That's if I can find where the chat's gone.
I've got it, so I can pop it in.
Would you mind?
Yeah.
Saved by Hannah. This happened a lot in this project. Lovely. So if you would all like to have a click on that link, that should take you in to join a Slack channel, which I've developed just for the purposes of this session. And we should see you pop up there. If anyone has any difficulty getting to Slack, getting to that community, then now is the time to unmute and ask for help. But I would love you to join us on this little disposable Slack community. It'll only exist for today. Got 3 questions that we would love to ask you. The way in which we ran this structured Slack is that we made little channels in Slack. When you join Slack, you will see on the left-hand side, there is a channel called General, which is where I am at the moment, and which is where you're starting to join us. Nice to see you. And then we have 3 question channels. Please don't look at them quite yet. We'll give folk a couple more minutes to join. And we can start saying hello. Well, I can start. Hello. Good to see you. And in a couple of minutes' time, I'll ask you to move to the channel called Question 1. And there is a question which we would find the answer really useful. It's a bit of an icebreaker. It's just a first question. If you have any trouble getting onto Slack, do please holler. If you don't want to, that's not a problem at all. But for the last 10 minutes of this session, we're going to invite people to enter that Question 1 channel. And if you'd like to do that now, that would be great. And just take a couple of minutes to answer the question of that channel. The question of that channel is, what's the best piece of advice you'd share for online practice? If you're having trouble getting into Slack, if you'd rather not get into Slack, do post your answer to that in the chat on this Zoom, and I will take it across. Thank you very much. 2 minutes.
I've also put the question in the Zoom chat. If you...
Hannah, you're fabulous. That's ace. And you know, you were all instinctively doing exactly what how we structured the Slack. You are all instinctively loving, liking, approving other people's comments. This is exactly what we found when we ran this as a new technique. It was extremely gratifying how open and sharing people were, and how much they interacted with each other's comments. So when we were structuring these questions, the first thing we did was say, take 2 minutes, consider an answer, and then take a minute, react to other people's answers, and then take a final minute and respond to your own, reflect on your own, and that's 4 minutes. And in 4 minutes, we could get a really useful sense of what people felt about the question. We used this technique a lot to validate our concepts and to come up with our own resources. And so we've only got 6 minutes left. So if we could move into question 2. And question 2, which I will post into our everyone chat, is, where do you go to share good practice with other counsellors? And again, a couple of minutes to answer the question. And then react to each other's answers.
Oh, I'm loving the to share good practice with other counsellors on Instagram.
Yes, I was loving that as well. I wonder if there might be a supplementary. So as I said, a minute to answer the question, a minute to react, another minute to respond to other people's reactions. But I'm really interested in how you share good practice on Instagram. That's fascinating. Wow. Okay, we've got 4 minutes left, so let's nip through to the third question. Which again I will paste into the chat. And that question is, what type of organisation should run a resource blank like the one we showed you? It is beautifully reassuring when you run this sort of session to see the phrase "several people are typing" in that Slack.
It's quite exciting, isn't it?
It's good, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Kerry. I mean, we've got a so we've now produced a model for how such a resource sharing bank can be. Yeah, that's a good point. So as we're saying, we've produced a model of how such a thing could work. And of course that's freely available. Perhaps one thing we could take to funders is the idea of working on a project to make that basic resource bank more copyable, so that organisations could shard it off and use it internally. But really, I would love to see the sector have a sector bank, and yeah, BACP are one of the sets of people that are on our list. We've got 2 minutes left. Thank you very much for giving up your lunchtime to listen and to interact with this session. I hope I've done two things. I hope I've illustrated a bit about how a design project works, how a design process works, and I hope that you've learned some useful pointers as to how you might feel using that design process. And I hope I've inspired you perhaps to find out more about it if you run digital projects. I hope we've shared the resource bank. And Hannah, if you could drop the URL of the resource bank into the Zoom chat, that would be really great. As we've said, that resource bank will last as it is forever. And I would love it if people were to add more resources, were to use it. And we are at the moment talking to one and a bit organisations about how the sector could take it forward as a sector-wide project, which we think will be the right thing to do. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been interesting. Thank you very much for your time. That is 12:45. And I hope that that gives you a smattering of time to get some lunch before the next meeting, which I imagine starts on the hour, because they all do. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Harry and Hannah. Really, really great session, and love the interactivity as well. So thank you. And thanks everybody for attending today. I hope you got a lot out of that. We will be following up to share the slides from this session, the recording, and I'll also include the link to the as well. But otherwise, thank you and hope to see you all soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.